What would you do if a young girl, alone in the dark, looked at you and whispered, "My mum promised she'd come back, but she never did"? Would you walk away, or would you change everything? The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves, and the city park was draped in a quiet, silvery mist. Daniel Carter walked with purposeful strides, his Italian leather shoes pressing against the damp grass, his loyal German shepherd, Max, trotting faithfully by his side. For Daniel, these late-night walks were a ritual, a brief escape from the glass towers and polished marble of his empire, Carter Development. It was a world of cold contracts, ruthless negotiations, and endless ambition. But tonight felt different. There was a restlessness in the air, an unease Daniel couldn't quite shake. As he walked, his thoughts were already drifting to the next big deal, the next conquest in his endless pursuit of success. He hardly noticed the quiet of the park, the gentle rustle of leaves, or the faint chirping of distant crickets. For Daniel, life was a series of calculations until Max suddenly broke from his side. "Max, heel!" Daniel called, his voice sharp, but the dog didn't listen. For the first time, his faithful companion ignored his command, bounding ahead with an unusual urgency. Daniel's brows furrowed. He followed, his long strides quickly closing the gap. As he neared, he saw Max standing beside a park bench, his tail wagging, nose nudging something, or rather, someone. It was a small figure, curled up against the cold, her knees tucked to her chest, a worn backpack used as a pillow. The faint glow of a distant street lamp cast a pale light on her face, dirt-smudged cheeks, tangled dark hair, and a pair of closed eyes, peaceful but strained. She was just a child, a girl no older than 9. "Hey!" Daniel called out, trying to keep his voice steady but firm. "What are you doing here?" The girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open, startled, but trying to appear brave. She sat up quickly, clutching her backpack. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear in her wide eyes. I didn't mean to bother anyone." Daniel hesitated, his sharp, calculating mind momentarily at a loss. "Where are your parents? Do you know how dangerous it is to be out here alone at this hour?" The girl's gaze dropped to her hands, her fingers nervously tracing the frayed straps of her backpack. "My mom. She told me to wait here. She went to find work and said she'd be back soon." "How long have you been waiting?" Daniel's voice softened despite himself. 5 days, the girl whispered, her voice breaking slightly, but she quickly straightened, trying to appear brave again. "She said she'd be right back." 5 days. The words struck Daniel like a cold wind. He looked at her more closely, her pale cheeks, her small frame shivering beneath the thin, patched sweater she wore, and her shoes scuffed and worn. His chest tightened, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. "What's your name?" he asked, kneeling down to her level. "Sophie," she whispered. "Sophie Bennett." Daniel hesitated. A part of him wanted to walk away, to call the authorities and let them handle it. That would be the logical thing to do, the safe, detached choice he always made. But another part of him, something deeper, wouldn't let him move. Max nuzzled Sophie's hand, his warm, gentle touch bringing the faintest hint of a smile to her lips. Daniel felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in a very long time. "Have you eaten anything today, Sophie?" he asked. She shook her head. "I had a granola bar yesterday." A silence stretched between them. The wind rustled through the trees, and the mist seemed to close in around them. Daniel took a deep breath. "Come with me," he said at last, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "I won't hurt you. You and Max seem to get along already. Let's get you somewhere warm." Sophie hesitated, her eyes searching his face for any sign of danger. But there was something in his tone, something steady, something she hadn't heard in a long time, reassurance. She nodded, standing slowly, her small fingers clutching her backpack. Max wagged his tail and fell in beside her, his loyal gaze never leaving her side. As Daniel led Sophie out of the park, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter, this quiet, shivering child, was about to change everything. Daniel's mansion stood like a fortress against the night, cold and imposing, its vast marble floors and high ceilings echoing with emptiness. But tonight, for the first time, it didn't feel like a sanctuary. It felt hollow. He led Sophie through the grand foyer, the crystal chandeliers casting a soft glow over her small, shivering form. Mrs. Thompson, his housekeeper, appeared from the kitchen, her eyes widening at the sight of the child. "Prepare a room," Daniel instructed quickly. "A warm bath, some clean clothes, and something for her to eat." Mrs. Thompson nodded, her instincts as a mother and grandmother taking over immediately. Sophie watched in quiet awe as Mrs. Thompson led her upstairs while Daniel remained in the foyer, running a hand through his hair, trying to process what he had just done. But as he stood there, Max nudged his hand, and Daniel looked down at his loyal companion. "What am I doing, Max?" he whispered. But Max simply wagged his tail, as if he knew something Daniel didn't. Upstairs, Sophie stood in the warm bathroom, steam filling the room. Mrs. Thompson gently helped her, her voice soothing, telling Sophie she was safe now. When Sophie finally came down, clean and dressed in a soft, oversized sweater Mrs. Thompson had found, Daniel was waiting by the fireplace. "Come, eat," he said, gesturing to the table where a warm bowl of soup awaited. Sophie hesitated, then sat, her small hands wrapping around the warm bowl. She ate quietly, her eyes glancing around the grand, empty room. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel watched her, feeling something stir in his chest, a sense of responsibility, but also something more. Something he couldn't quite name yet. "You're safe here, Sophie," he said quietly. "Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow." The morning light filtered gently through the tall windows of Daniel Carter's grand mansion. He stood at the edge of the dining room table, a cup of steaming coffee in his hand, but his gaze kept drifting toward the hallway. His world, usually filled with calculated decisions and high-stakes negotiations, now seemed narrowed to the fragile hope of a little girl. Sophie Bennett appeared at the doorway, her small figure almost lost in the oversized sweater Mrs. Thompson had found for her. Her blonde hair, neatly brushed, framed her innocent face, but her eyes carried a quiet weight beyond her years. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she greeted softly, a hint of shyness in her voice. "Good morning, Sophie," Daniel responded, trying to soften his usual commanding tone. "Did you sleep well?" "I did. Thank you," she replied, her lips curling into a faint smile. Mrs. Thompson entered the room, placing a plate of warm pancakes in front of Sophie. The girl's eyes widened with delight, and she whispered a heartfelt "thank you" before picking up her fork. Daniel watched her eat, a mix of curiosity and concern filling his mind. Who was this child? Where was her mother? And why did he feel this sudden, overpowering need to help her? Sophie ate quietly, each bite slow and careful, as if she were afraid the plate might disappear. Max, Daniel's loyal golden retriever, sat beside her, his brown eyes fixed on her with a gentle curiosity. He had taken to Sophie immediately, a rare display of affection from the usually reserved dog. As Sophie reached the last piece of her pancake, she looked up, a hint of nervousness returning to her face. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Will you really help me find my mom?" Daniel set his coffee cup down, his gaze steady and reassuring. "Yes, Sophie, I promise. We will find your mother." Those words weren't just a promise to Sophie, they were a promise to himself. In that moment, he felt something shift within him, a sense of purpose beyond business, beyond profit. A sense of humanity he hadn't felt in years. After breakfast, Daniel made a call to Sarah Adams, a private investigator he trusted with delicate matters. "Sarah, I need your help finding someone. A missing mother. Her name is Emma Bennett." Sarah, known for her sharp instincts and relentless determination, asked a few quick questions before getting to work. Daniel watched Sophie as she played with Max in the living room, her laughter light but edged with worry. "Do you remember anything else about your mom, Sophie?" he asked, gently kneeling beside her. "She works a lot, cleaning houses, serving tables, but she lost her job a few weeks ago," Sophie explained, her voice growing softer. "She went out to look for work and never came back." Daniel felt a knot tighten in his chest. A woman struggling to make ends meet, disappearing without a trace. It was a situation he had never considered, living in his world of luxury and influence. "Do you have any other family, grandparents, aunts or uncles?" he inquired. Sophie shook her head. "It's just me and my mom." Daniel stood, his mind racing. He had connections, resources, and the ability to move mountains if needed. But for the first time, those assets felt like a distant, useless shield against the harsh reality Sophie was facing. By the afternoon, Sarah called back. "Daniel, I found a trace of Emma Bennett. She worked at a small cafe but was let go 2 weeks ago. After that, nothing. No employment record, no hospital admission, nothing." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Could she have been in an accident or taken to the hospital under another name?" "That's a possibility," Sarah admitted. "I'm checking all nearby hospitals for any unidentified patients. I'll keep you updated." Daniel returned to the living room, where Sophie sat on the floor with Max, her small fingers running through the dog's soft fur. She looked up as he entered, hope and fear mixed in her eyes. "Sophie, we're doing everything we can to find your mom," he reassured her, sitting down beside her. Sophie's gaze wavered. "I'm scared she's not coming back." Instinctively, Daniel reached out, pulling Sophie into a gentle hug. "Don't be afraid." "I won't let you go through this alone." Max nuzzled closer, resting his head on Sophie's lap, as if adding his own silent promise. That night, Sophie fell asleep in one of the mansion's guest rooms, a space far too large for a little girl used to tiny apartments and shared spaces. But Daniel remained nearby, pacing the hallway outside her room, his mind a storm of thoughts. Why did he care so much about this child? Why couldn't he simply call social services and let them handle it? He had spent his life building an empire, thriving in the cutthroat world of business, but this little girl had shattered his carefully constructed armor. Morning came, and as sunlight poured through the windows, Daniel made another call. "Sarah, I want you to put every resource on this. I don't care about the cost. Find Emma Bennett." But hours passed with no news. Daniel tried to work, but his mind kept wandering back to Sophie, who spent her time in the garden with Max, drawing pictures of flowers and animals. Her innocent smile hid the fear that lingered just beneath the surface. Finally, Sarah called again. "Daniel, I've got something." An unidentified woman, matching Emma's description, was admitted to Riverside Medical Center 3 days ago. "She's in the ICU, unconscious." Daniel's heart raced. "I'm on my way." He rushed to the hospital, his mind a blur of worry. Was it really her? Would she be okay? And what would he tell Sophie if it wasn't? At the hospital, a nurse led him to a small room. Through the glass, he saw a woman lying motionless, her face pale and her body connected to a series of machines. Daniel's heart sank. It was Emma. "Her condition is critical," the nurse explained. "She was found unconscious at a construction site. No identification, but we traced her through her medical records." Daniel leaned against the wall, struggling to process everything. Emma Bennett wasn't just a stranger. She was a mother, Sophie's mother, lying on the edge of life and death. He stood there for a long moment, then turned and walked back toward the exit. Sophie was waiting, and she needed to know that there was still hope. When he returned home, Sophie looked up with expectant eyes. Daniel knelt beside her, his voice calm but firm. "We found your mom, Sophie. She's in the hospital. She's hurt, but the doctors are taking care of her." Tears welled in Sophie's eyes, but she didn't cry. Instead, she nodded, her small hands gripping Max's fur tightly. "Can we see her?" she whispered. Daniel reached out, gently placing his hand over hers. "Yes, Sophie, we'll see her, and we won't leave her alone." The drive to Riverside Medical Center felt like an eternity. Daniel Carter gripped the steering wheel tightly, his jaw clenched, his mind racing with thoughts of Emma Bennett, a woman he had never met, yet who had suddenly become central to his life. Beside him, Sophie sat quietly, her small hands clutching Max's leash. The golden retriever seemed to sense the tension, his calm presence offering silent comfort. When they arrived, Daniel guided Sophie gently through the hospital's bustling corridors. He had called ahead, and a kind-faced nurse met them at the entrance to the ICU. "This way," she said, her voice soft and understanding. As they walked, Daniel glanced down at Sophie. Her wide eyes took in everything, the sterile white walls, the quiet beeping of machines, the rush of nurses and doctors moving with purpose. Finally, they stopped outside a room where the blinds were partially drawn. Through the glass, Daniel saw Emma Bennett lying motionless on the hospital bed, her face pale against the crisp white sheets. Tubes and monitors surrounded her, their steady hum a constant reminder of the fragility of life. Sophie's small hand tightened around Daniel's fingers. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel knelt beside her, placing a reassuring arm around her shoulders. "She's here, Sophie. And the doctors are doing everything they can." The nurse gently opened the door, allowing them inside. Sophie hesitated at the threshold, then stepped forward, her tiny feet almost silent on the tiled floor. She stood beside the bed, her eyes fixed on her mother's peaceful but unresponsive face. "Hi, Mum," Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. "It's me. It's Sophie. I've been waiting for you." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away, trying to be brave. Max, who had followed them quietly, now sat beside Sophie, resting his head against her leg, as if offering silent support. Daniel stood a few steps back, watching the scene with a mixture of sadness and determination. He had never imagined finding himself in this situation, a man who had built an empire, now powerless in the face of a little girl's heartbreak. "How long has she been like this?" Daniel asked the nurse, his voice steady but strained. 3 days, the nurse replied gently. "She was found unconscious at a construction site." "No identification. If not for the medical records we traced, she would still be a Jane Doe." "Her condition?" Daniel pressed. "Critical, but stable. She has a head injury and some internal trauma. We're monitoring her closely, but—" The nurse hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Her recovery will depend on her body's response to treatment." Daniel's chest tightened. He turned back to Sophie, who had climbed onto the chair beside the bed, her small hand resting on her mother's. "Mom, please wake up," Sophie whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm here. I'm okay. And there's a really nice man helping me. His name is Mr. Carter. And Max is here too." The nurse's gaze softened, and she quietly stepped out, leaving them alone. Daniel walked to the other side of the bed, looking down at Emma's face. There was something hauntingly peaceful about her expression, but he knew better. Peace wasn't the same as safety. "Sophie," he said gently, "would you like me to read to your mom?" Sometimes hearing familiar voices can help. Sophie nodded, a spark of hope in her eyes. "Mom loves stories. She used to read to me every night, even when she was tired." Daniel's heart ached at the image of this woman struggling, working herself to exhaustion, yet still making time for her daughter. Without another word, he pulled a small children's book from his coat pocket, one he had grabbed from home, not knowing if Sophie would need a distraction. Sitting down, he began to read. His voice was calm, each word measured and steady. Sophie leaned against her mother's arm, listening quietly, her eyes never leaving Emma's face. The minutes stretched into an hour, and then 2. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting equipment, but Daniel kept reading. His voice never wavered, even when his mind wandered to thoughts of Emma's struggle, a life of hardship he could hardly imagine. Finally, as the afternoon light began to fade, Sophie's eyelids grew heavy. Exhaustion claimed her, and she drifted off, her head resting against her mother's arm. Max curled up at her feet, his steady breathing a gentle rhythm in the quiet room. Daniel stood, his legs stiff, his heart heavy. He reached out, gently adjusting the blanket over Sophie's shoulders, his gaze lingering on Emma's face. "I don't know you," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath, "but I promise you, I will do everything I can to help you, to help Sophie." "You're not alone anymore." Leaving the room, he found Sarah Adams waiting in the hallway, her expression serious. "I spoke with the hospital administrators. Emma's medical bills are extensive." "Don't worry about the cost," Daniel replied without hesitation. "I'll cover everything." Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's generous. But this isn't just about money, Daniel. Sophie needs stability. A sense of security." "I know," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "I'm trying to figure out how to give her that, but I don't even know if Emma will recover." "And if she doesn't," Sarah pressed, her tone gentle but firm, "what happens to Sophie then?" Daniel looked down the hallway where Sophie slept, unaware of the uncertainty surrounding her life. His jaw tightened with resolve. "Then I'll take care of her," he declared. "I won't let her be alone," Sarah nodded, a hint of respect in her gaze. "I'll have my team look into Emma's situation, see if we can find any relatives, but for now, Sophie has you." Daniel's phone buzzed, a message from his office reminding him of a board meeting he was now missing. For a moment, the world of corporate deals and business empires felt distant, almost trivial. "I don't care about the meeting," he muttered, putting his phone away. Back in the room, Sophie stirred, waking to find Daniel still there, sitting by the window. Relief washed over her face. "Did you leave?" she asked, her voice drowsy with sleep. "No, Sophie," he assured her, crossing the room. "I promised I'd be here. I don't break promises." The little girl smiled, a quiet trust settling in her gaze. "Thank you." That night, Daniel made arrangements with the hospital for a private room, ensuring Emma would receive the best care available. He arranged for meals to be delivered to the room for Sophie, who refused to leave her mother's side. By the second day, he had a small cot set up in the room for Sophie and brought over her favorite stuffed animal, a worn, floppy bunny she had carried in her backpack. Every morning, he arrived with fresh flowers, filling the room with a touch of warmth. Every night, he read to them both, his voice calm, his presence a constant reassurance. But as the days passed, the weight of uncertainty pressed heavier on his shoulders. Was he doing enough? Would Emma wake up? What would happen to Sophie if she didn't? One afternoon, as Sophie napped beside her mother, a nurse touched Daniel's shoulder. "You know," she whispered, "I've seen miracles happen when someone doesn't give up." Daniel looked at the sleeping child, then at the woman fighting for her life. His jaw set with determination. "I won't give up," he promised. Not on her, not on either of them. The days that followed became a delicate dance of hope and helplessness. Each morning, Daniel Carter arrived at Riverside Medical Center with a fresh bouquet of flowers and a warm cup of cocoa for Sophie. The nurses had begun to recognize him, their respectful nods a silent acknowledgement of his constant presence. Sophie had settled into a quiet routine, spending her days beside her mother, reading aloud from the books Daniel brought, and whispering stories about their time together. But as Daniel watched Sophie's unwavering faith, his own anxiety grew. Emma remained motionless, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, but there were no signs of waking. Her face was peaceful, but the stillness was haunting. One afternoon, as Daniel stood by the window staring out at the city beyond, Sarah Adams stepped quietly into the room. "Daniel," she began, her tone calm but serious. "We need to talk." He turned, his expression instantly guarded. "About Emma?" "Yes," Sarah nodded, gesturing for him to step outside. "We've traced her employment history. She's worked a string of part-time jobs, mostly under-the-table work, cleaning offices, waiting tables, always just getting by." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had imagined hardship, but hearing it confirmed made it real. "And Sophie, no family, no one else?" Sarah shook her head. "I spoke with the social services department. Emma has no listed relatives. Sophie is effectively alone, except for you." "Not alone," Daniel corrected, his voice firm. "She has me." A small smile tugged at the corners of Sarah's mouth. "I thought you'd say that. But Daniel, you need to be prepared. If Emma doesn't wake up—" "She will," Daniel interrupted, a hint of desperation in his voice. "But if she doesn't," Sarah pressed gently, "what is your plan for Sophie?" Daniel leaned against the wall, his gaze distant. "My plan is to make sure she never feels alone. To make sure she always has someone who cares about her." "And legally?" Sarah asked. "Will you adopt her? Have you considered that?" The question hit him like a wave. Adoption. The word felt heavy, a promise, a commitment, a life-changing decision. But as he thought of Sophie's wide, hopeful eyes and her unwavering faith in her mother's return, he realized there was no other option he could live with. "Yes," he said, his voice steady now. "If it comes to that, I will adopt her." Sarah nodded, her expression a mix of respect and concern. "Then we need to start the process now. Temporary guardianship first, just to ensure you have legal authority. It will make things easier, especially with medical decisions." Daniel's mind raced, but his resolve didn't waver. "Whatever it takes." Back in the room, Sophie was sitting on the edge of Emma's bed, her small fingers tracing patterns on her mother's blanket. "Mom, can you hear me?" she whispered. "Please wake up. I miss you." Daniel's chest tightened. He walked over, placing a gentle hand on Sophie's shoulder. "She's trying, Sophie. Sometimes it just takes time." "But what if she can't wake up?" Sophie's voice was small, a crack in her usual brave demeanor. "Then we keep talking to her, we keep hoping," Daniel said, kneeling beside her, "and we make sure she knows she's not alone. You're not alone." Sophie looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and gratitude. "You won't leave, right? Even if Mom doesn't wake up?" "I promise, Sophie," Daniel whispered, his voice firm but gentle. "I won't leave. You and I, we're in this together." Sophie smiled weakly and leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Max, who had been lying quietly at the foot of the bed, stood and padded over, nuzzling Sophie's leg. She reached down, stroking his fur, the soft warmth comforting her. As the afternoon wore on, a doctor entered the room, checking Emma's vitals. Daniel stood, his expression tense. "Doctor, is there any change?" The doctor sighed, her expression a mix of professionalism and sympathy. "Her condition is stable, but there's been no significant improvement. We're doing everything we can. Is there anything else we can try? Another specialist?" "A new treatment." Daniel's voice was edged with desperation. "We're exploring all options," the doctor assured him. "But for now, it's a waiting game." Waiting. That was the hardest part. Every day felt like an eternity, a constant state of hope tinged with dread. Sophie's faith never wavered, but Daniel's was tested with each passing hour. That evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep beside her mother, Daniel stood by the window, staring out at the city lights. His mind drifted back to his own childhood, a time when his father's absence had been a constant shadow over his life. He had sworn never to become like his father, distant, disconnected, a man who saw family as a burden. Yet here he was, feeling the weight of responsibility for a child who wasn't even his by blood. But she was his by choice, and that meant more. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. A nurse stepped in, a gentle smile on her face. "Mr. Carter, you've been here almost every day. The staff, well, we've noticed." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Noticed what?" "Noticed how much you care." "Sophie, she's lucky to have you." "It's not luck," Daniel murmured, his gaze returning to the sleeping girl. "It's something else." The nurse hesitated, then spoke softly. "Sometimes people come into our lives when we need them most. And sometimes we become the person someone else needs." Daniel smiled faintly. "Thank you." As the nurse left, he walked over to the bed, adjusting the blanket around Sophie. Her small hand rested on her mother's, her breathing soft and steady. "I don't know if you can hear me, Emma," Daniel whispered, leaning close to her. "But I need you to know. Sophie is safe. I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." His hand gently brushed a stray lock of hair from Emma's forehead. Her face remained still, peaceful yet somehow distant. That night, Daniel made a decision. The next morning, he met with Sarah and signed the paperwork for temporary guardianship of Sophie. It was a legal step, but for Daniel, it was much more. It was a promise, a commitment to a little girl who had lost everything except her hope. Returning to the hospital, he found Sophie awake, sitting beside Emma with Max curled up at her feet. "Sophie," he began, kneeling beside her, "I have something to tell you." She looked at him, her expression curious but cautious. "I spoke with the doctors and the hospital. I've made sure that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. You'll stay with me." "I'll take care of you." Sophie's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," Daniel promised. "I'm not just going to be someone who helps for a while. I'm going to be here for you. Always." Tears filled Sophie's eyes, and she leaned forward, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Daniel hugged her gently, feeling the weight of his promise settle into his heart. But it wasn't a burden. It was a purpose. As he held Sophie close, a soft beeping sound filled the room. His gaze shifted to the monitors beside Emma's bed. The steady rhythm had changed slightly, a subtle shift in the pattern. A nurse rushed in, checking the machines, her expression growing focused. "Mr. Carter, we may be seeing some early signs of improvement." Daniel's heart raced. "Does that mean she could wake up?" "It's too soon to say," the nurse cautioned, "but it's a positive sign." Hope surged in Daniel's chest. He turned back to Sophie, who was watching him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Did you hear that, Sophie?" Daniel whispered, his voice trembling. "Your mom, she might be waking up." Sophie's face lit up, a smile breaking through her tears. "Mom, please wake up." Daniel's hand gently rested on Emma's, his voice a soft whisper. "Emma, come back to us. Sophie needs you." "We both do." The following days became a blur of cautious hope and quiet tension. Daniel Carter kept a near constant vigil by Emma's bedside, his eyes searching for any sign of awareness. Sophie was always there too, her small hand resting gently on her mother's, her voice a constant, soft murmur of stories, memories, and whispered pleas. Max, the loyal dog, seemed to sense the gravity of the situation, rarely leaving Sophie's side, his large head resting on her lap. But while Sophie clung to faith, Daniel wrestled with doubt. Every beep of the heart monitor, every flicker of the IV lines seemed like a fragile promise, one that could be shattered at any moment. "Is she going to wake up today, Daniel?" Sophie asked one morning, her hopeful eyes searching his face. "I don't know, sweetheart," Daniel replied, kneeling beside her, "but she's trying. And we're here with her." Sophie smiled, her fingers brushing a lock of hair from Emma's forehead. She can hear us. I just know she can. Daniel wished he could share her certainty. But as each day passed without change, his fear grew. He had promised Sophie that he would take care of her, that she wouldn't be alone. But what if Emma never woke up? Could he truly fill the void in Sophie's life? Could he become the father figure she needed, not just in words, but in every moment of her childhood? One afternoon, as the soft winter light filtered through the hospital window, Sarah Adams arrived, a file in her hands and a look of determination on her face. "Daniel," she began, her voice calm but serious, "we need to talk." Daniel stood, his jaw tightening. "About what?" "About preparing for all possibilities," Sarah said gently. "I know you want Emma to wake up. We all do. But you need to be ready, just in case." "Just in case she doesn't," Daniel whispered, the weight of the words pressing against his chest. "I'm not saying to give up hope," Sarah continued, "but legally, we need to consider Sophie's future. You've signed temporary guardianship papers. But if she doesn't recover, what happens next?" I adopt her," Daniel said, the words feeling both right and terrifying at the same time. "Then we need to start that process," Sarah said, "because if something happens, Sophie deserves stability. She deserves to know she's not going to lose you too." Daniel nodded, though his mind was spinning. Could he do this? Could he truly become Sophie's father? He glanced at the little girl, who was now drawing a picture on a small notepad beside Emma's bed. She had drawn a house, a smiling woman, a dog, and a tall figure that looked a little like him. "She's already begun to see you as family, Daniel," Sarah whispered. "The question is, can you see yourself as family too?" "I can," Daniel said, his voice steadying, "because I already do." That evening, as the sky outside turned a soft shade of lavender, Daniel sat beside Sophie, watching her color her drawing. "What are you making there?" he asked gently. "A picture for Mom," Sophie smiled. "When she wakes up, I want her to see it first thing." Daniel's chest tightened. He leaned closer, studying the picture. "It's beautiful, Sophie." "Do you think she'll like it?" Sophie asked, looking up at him. "I know she will," Daniel replied, his voice soft. Just then, a gentle knock sounded on the door, and a nurse entered with a kind smile. "Mr. Carter, we've noticed some changes in Emma's vitals. The doctors would like to run a few more tests." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "Changes? Good changes?" "We're hopeful," the nurse said, though her expression remained carefully neutral. As the medical team entered, Daniel led Sophie out of the room, his hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart. They're just checking to see if she's getting better." Sophie nodded, though she clung to his arm, her eyes never leaving the door. They waited in the hallway, each minute stretching into an eternity. Daniel felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. His mind raced with fear and hope, each emotion battling for dominance. Finally, the doctor stepped out, her expression calm but encouraging. "Mr. Carter, we're seeing some signs of neural activity. It's not a guarantee, but it's a positive sign." "Does that mean she's waking up?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling with excitement. "It means she might," the doctor replied gently. "We'll keep monitoring her closely." As they re-entered the room, Daniel's hand instinctively found Sophie's, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You hear that, Sophie? Your mom is trying." Sophie's smile was a ray of sunlight piercing through the darkness. She rushed to the bedside, leaning close to Emma's ear. "Mom, I knew you could hear me." "Please keep trying. I'm here. We're all here." Daniel stood back, watching, his chest swelling with a mixture of hope and fear. He stepped toward the window, his gaze distant, his thoughts a whirlwind. He had come so close to losing everything: Sophie, Emma, even himself. But now, there was a spark of hope. "Daniel?" Sophie's voice pulled him back. "Yes, sweetheart?" He turned, his voice warm but cautious. "Will you always be here?" Sophie asked, her small hand resting on Emma's arm. Daniel crossed the room, kneeling beside her. "Yes, Sophie, I'll always be here." "No matter what." "Promise?" she whispered, her voice wavering. "I promise," Daniel whispered, his hand gently covering hers. The days continued to pass, each one filled with quiet hope and whispered stories. Sophie spent every moment by her mother's side, and Daniel rarely left, only stepping out when absolutely necessary. He made arrangements at his office, delegating tasks and stepping back from his usual role. His focus had shifted from business to something far more important. Late one evening, as Sophie slept curled up in the armchair beside Emma's bed, Daniel found himself leaning close to Emma, his voice a soft, trembling whisper. "Emma, I don't know if you can hear me, but I need you to know. I never stopped caring. I never stopped thinking about you, and I will never let Sophie be alone. But please come back. She needs you." As his words hung in the air, a faint, almost imperceptible twitch crossed Emma's fingers. Daniel's breath caught. He leaned closer, his heart pounding. "Emma, can you hear me?" Nothing. Silence. But he had seen it. A small, barely noticeable movement. "Sophie," he whispered, gently waking the little girl. "Sweetheart, I think your mum moved." Sophie's eyes flew open, and she scrambled to her mother's side. "Mom, can you hear me?" "It's me, Sophie, I'm here." Daniel called for the nurse, his voice filled with barely contained excitement. Within moments, a team of doctors flooded the room, their faces tense but focused. "She's showing signs of response," one of them whispered, watching the monitor. "Let's keep monitoring. It's a positive development." Daniel held Sophie close, his arms wrapped around her, and together they watched Emma's still form, their hearts racing with hope. "Please, Mom," Sophie whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Don't give up. We're right here." Daniel's hand gently rested on Emma's, his voice a soft, steady promise. "Emma, come back to us. Please." And as they stood together, hope became something tangible, a fragile thread pulling them forward, refusing to let them give up. The world outside the hospital seemed to blur into an endless grey, but inside the room where Emma lay, time moved in fragile, hopeful heartbeats. Sophie remained a constant presence, her small voice a gentle melody in the stillness. Daniel Carter rarely left, only stepping away when absolutely necessary, his gaze always returning to the bed where Emma lay motionless. Every day began the same. Sophie would rush to her mother's side, taking her hand, her soft voice filling the room. "Good morning, Mom. It's me, Sophie. I'm here. We're all here." Daniel would bring in fresh flowers for the bedside table, lilies and daisies. Emma's favorites, their bright colors a small defiance against the sterile white of the hospital room. And each evening he would read aloud, his voice steady but always tinged with emotion. He read stories, poems, even whispered memories of the times he and Emma had shared, and each time he hoped for a response, a flicker of her eyelids, a twitch of her fingers, anything. But as the days passed, doubt began to creep in. Daniel found himself staring at Emma, his heart aching with fear. What if she never woke up? What if Sophie was left with nothing but memories of a mother who could no longer hold her, no longer speak to her? Could he truly become enough for her? Could he be both a protector and a guide, a source of comfort and strength? These thoughts haunted him one rainy evening as he stood by the hospital window, watching the grey sky weep against the glass. Sophie was asleep in the armchair, her small body curled up under a warm blanket. Daniel's gaze shifted to Emma, her face pale but peaceful, her chest rising and falling in the slow, rhythmic dance of survival. "Please, Emma," he whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. "Please wake up. Sophie needs you, I need you." But there was only silence. The door clicked softly open, and Sarah Adams stepped inside, her expression warm but concerned. "How are you holding up, Daniel?" she asked gently. He turned, trying to smile. "Hanging on. I don't know how Sophie does it. She never loses hope." "Children are resilient in ways we can't always understand," Sarah replied. "But they also sense more than we think. She looks to you for strength." "She shouldn't have to," Daniel muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. "She's just a little girl." "But she has you," Sarah reminded him. "And right now that's everything." Daniel nodded, though his heart remained heavy. "Sarah, what if she doesn't wake up? What if this is all Sophie ever has of her mother?" "Then you'll do what you've been doing," Sarah said firmly. "You'll love her, you'll protect her, and you'll never let her feel alone." As Sarah left, Daniel sank into the chair beside Emma, his hand finding hers. "Emma," he whispered, "I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, please fight. Sophie needs you. I need you." Sophie stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Is she waking up?" she asked, her voice a mixture of sleep and hope. "Not yet, sweetheart," Daniel whispered, "but we're here, and we're not giving up." Sophie slid off the chair and climbed onto the bed, her small fingers brushing through her mother's hair. "Mom, I drew another picture for you. I know you can see it somehow. I know you're listening." Her voice was a soft melody, a thread of faith in the quiet room. Daniel watched her, his heart swelling with a strange mix of pride and sadness. Sophie's strength was a light in the darkness, a light he clung to. Days stretched into another week. Daniel's visits became longer, his calls to the office shorter. His team had begun to understand his absence, stepping up to manage the workload he had once shouldered alone. But Daniel didn't care. His priorities had shifted. His world had narrowed to this room, to this fragile hope that Emma would return to them. One evening, as the rain continued to tap against the window, Sophie turned to Daniel with a serious expression. "Will she remember us when she wakes up?" she asked quietly. Daniel knelt beside her, his gaze steady. "Of course she will, Sophie. You are unforgettable." "But what if she forgets me?" Sophie whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. Daniel reached out, pulling her into his arms. "Sophie, your mum loves you more than anything in this world. Nothing can take that away, not even this." "But what if she's scared?" Sophie whispered, her voice muffled against his chest. "What if she thinks we're not here?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Then we'll make sure she knows. We'll keep talking to her. We'll keep telling her that we love her, that we're here. And one day, she'll come back to us." Sophie's small arms tightened around him, her silent tears soaking into his shirt. "I don't want to lose her." "You won't," Daniel whispered, his own voice cracking. "I promise you, Sophie. I won't let you lose her." The next morning, as the sunlight broke through the rain clouds, Daniel brought Sophie her favorite breakfast pancakes, shaped like little hearts, with a swirl of syrup, but she barely touched them, her gaze fixed on Emma's still form. Daniel's heart ached for her, but he didn't push. Instead, he sat beside her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "Sophie, do you want to talk to your mom today?" Sophie nodded, wiping her tears. "Can I sing to her? The song she used to sing to me when I was scared?" "Of course," Daniel whispered. Sophie climbed onto the bed, carefully lying beside her mother. Her small voice began, a soft, trembling melody that filled the room. "Hush, little darling. Close your eyes. The stars will guard you from the skies. Mommy's here, just hold on tight. You're safe, my love, all through the night." Her voice wavered, but she continued, her fingers gently tracing her mother's hand. Daniel stood by the bed, his eyes misting as he listened. Sophie's voice was a thread of light in the darkness, a promise that she would not let go. And then, it happened. Emma's fingers twitched. Daniel froze, his heart pounding. Sophie, did you see that? Sophie's eyes widened. Mom? Mom, can you hear me? Another twitch. And then, a faint, almost imperceptible sigh escaped Emma's lips. Daniel's hand shot to the call button, his voice trembling. Doctor, we need a doctor. The medical team rushed in, their faces a mix of shock and determination. Sophie was gently pulled back, but she fought to stay close. No, don't take me away. Mom, I'm here. Please hear me. One of the nurses gently knelt beside her, speaking softly. She can hear you, sweetie. Keep talking. Sophie's voice rose, trembling but clear. Mom, it's me, Sophie. Please wake up. I love you so much. Don't leave me. Daniel watched, his heart pounding against his ribs. He reached for Sophie's hand, his own shaking. Come on, Emma, please. Please come back. Emma's eyelids fluttered. A faint, whispered sound slipped from her lips. Sophie? Sophie's gasp was a cry of pure joy. Mom! Mom, I'm here! Emma's eyes slowly opened, dazed and unfocused, but alive. Her gaze drifted, and then settled on Sophie's tear-filled face. Sophie, my baby. Sophie threw herself into her mother's arms, sobbing. Mom, I knew you'd come back. I knew it. Daniel felt his knees weaken, his hand covering his mouth as tears streamed down his face. Emma, you're here. You're really here. Emma's gaze shifted to him, and her lips curled into a weak but unmistakable smile. Daniel? I'm here, he whispered, stepping closer, his heart bursting with relief. I'm here, Emma. We're both here. The impossible had become real. Emma was awake. Emma's return to consciousness had been nothing short of a miracle, but recovery was a journey measured in small steps and quiet victories. As the sunlight filtered through the hospital window, Emma's gaze followed the soft beams dancing across the room. Her body felt weak, her voice a fragile whisper, but her heart was strong, filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Beside her, Sophie never left. Her tiny hand clung to Emma's, her smile a constant source of warmth. She told Emma stories of the days they spent waiting, how Daniel had stayed by her side, reading stories, bringing flowers, and never giving up hope. Emma's tired eyes filled with tears. She reached up to touch Sophie's face. You were so brave, my love. Daniel hovered nearby, his relief tempered by a quiet caution. He didn't want to overwhelm Emma, didn't want to push too hard. But he couldn't stop his eyes from following her every movement, a constant, silent prayer that this wasn't just a fleeting moment. Daniel, Emma whispered one morning as the nurses adjusted her pillows. How long was I gone? 3 weeks, he answered softly, his voice thick with emotion. But we never left. We were always here. Her hand reached for his, trembling but steady. Thank you for everything. You don't have to thank me, Daniel replied, gently squeezing her hand. Your family, Emma. You always were. The days blurred together in a gentle routine. Sophie would sit beside her mother, telling her about every little thing, the games she played, the flowers Daniel brought, the stories he read. Daniel would bring fresh flowers every morning, their bright colors a promise of hope. Slowly, Emma's strength began to return. The doctors were amazed at her resilience, but they warned that her recovery would take time. Physical therapy sessions became part of her daily routine, her first steps slow and shaky, but filled with determination. And always, Sophie was there, her small hands steadying her mother's, her laughter a spark of light. One afternoon, as Emma managed to take a few steps with the help of a walker, she looked at Sophie, her face a mixture of joy and tears. I'm walking, Sophie. I'm walking. Sophie clapped, her cheers filling the hallway. You're amazing, Mom. Emma's gaze shifted to Daniel, who stood just a few feet away, his smile wide, but his eyes glistening with emotion. You did this too, she whispered. He shook his head. You're the strong one, Emma. I just never gave up on you. Their connection deepened with each day. Moments of quiet conversation turned into laughter. Old memories became stories shared with Sophie, and the pain of the past began to heal. Emma's spirit returned, her smile growing brighter, her voice gaining strength. Yet beneath the surface, there was a question she hadn't dared to ask. One evening, as the sun cast a warm, golden glow through the window, Emma looked at Daniel with a mixture of fear and hope. Daniel, will you still be here when I leave this place? Daniel's heart ached at the uncertainty in her voice. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. Emma, I didn't stay because I had to. I stayed because I wanted to, because I love you. Because I love Sophie. We're a family, if you'll have me. Tears filled Emma's eyes. I thought I lost you a long time ago. You didn't lose me, Daniel whispered. I lost myself, but you and Sophie, you brought me back. Sophie, who had been drawing in the corner, looked up with wide eyes. Does this mean we get to stay together? Like, forever? Daniel smiled, his voice warm and steady. If your mom agrees. Emma's laughter was soft, a sound like music. Forever sounds perfect. From that moment, their future began to take shape. The doctors arranged for Emma to continue her rehabilitation at home, and Daniel prepared his home to welcome her. Sophie helped decorate her mother's room, filling it with bright drawings and fresh flowers. The day Emma was discharged, Daniel stood by the door with a bouquet of her favorite lilies, his smile filled with pride. Sophie ran ahead, bouncing with excitement. Mom, you're coming home! Our home! Emma's heart swelled. She looked at Daniel, her hand slipping into his. I never thought I'd have this, she whispered. You always had it, Daniel replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. You just forgot for a little while. As they stepped into the warm sunlight, Sophie grabbed both their hands, her laughter filling the air. Mom, can we get ice cream on the way home? Daniel chuckled. Anything you want, Sophie. Emma's laughter joined her daughter's, a sound that seemed to chase away the shadows that had once clouded her life. Together, they walked towards the car, a family bound not just by love, but by the strength that had carried them through the darkness. Emma's recovery continued at a steady pace, each day bringing a new victory, a few more steps without the walker, a moment of laughter without the weight of worry, a sense of warmth returning to her once pale cheeks. Daniel was there for all of it, his presence a constant reassurance, and Sophie's joyful energy was the sunlight that filled their new home. Daniel's house, which had once felt like an echoing mansion, now buzzed with life. Sophie's drawings decorated the kitchen, her school projects lined the hallway, and her laughter filled the living room. Emma's touch could be seen in the fresh flowers on the dining table, the cozy blankets she arranged on the couch, and the soft, inviting scents of home-cooked meals. But it wasn't just the house that changed. Daniel changed too. He left his office earlier each day, eagerly looking forward to helping Sophie with her homework or joining her in a game of hide-and-seek in the backyard. His phone, once glued to his hand, was often forgotten on the kitchen counter while he spent time with his family. His world had shifted, and he had never felt more at peace. One crisp Saturday morning, Daniel decided to surprise Emma and Sophie with a trip to the farmer's market. As they wandered through the bustling stalls, Emma's eyes lit up at the sight of fresh flowers and handmade candles, while Sophie darted between the colorful produce, her excitement contagious. Look, Mom, Sophie called out, holding up a bright orange pumpkin. Can we get one for the porch? Emma laughed, reaching out to touch the pumpkin's cool surface. Of course, sweetheart. It will look perfect. Daniel stood back for a moment, watching them with a smile. Seeing Emma's smile, the light in her eyes, and the carefree joy in Sophie's laughter, it was everything he had ever wanted. He didn't need boardroom success or luxury to feel fulfilled. This was his wealth. As they strolled back to the car, their arms filled with fresh vegetables, flowers, and Sophie's prized pumpkin, Emma slipped her hand into Daniel's. "Thank you," she whispered. He looked at her, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "For what?" "For this," she said, gesturing to the bustling market, to Sophie skipping ahead, to the warmth of his hand in hers. "For giving us a life I never thought we could have." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "Emma, you gave me a life. I was just walking through empty halls before you two came into it." That evening, they turned the pumpkin into a glowing jack-o'-lantern, Sophie insisting on a happy, smiling face instead of a scary one. Emma helped Sophie carve it, her laughter mixing with her daughter's giggles, while Daniel carefully roasted the pumpkin seeds, his first attempt at a family recipe. As night fell, the three of them curled up on the couch, a warm blanket wrapped around them, a movie flickering on the television. Sophie snuggled between them, her head resting on Emma's shoulder while her tiny hand held onto Daniel's. "Are we a real family now?" Sophie whispered, her voice soft and sleepy. Emma kissed her daughter's forehead. "We always were, sweetheart." Daniel leaned closer, his voice gentle. "And we always will be." Sophie's eyes fluttered closed, a peaceful smile on her lips. Daniel reached over and wrapped his arm around Emma, feeling her lean into him, her warmth a comfort he never wanted to lose. Outside, the glowing jack-o'-lantern on the porch cast a soft, welcoming light. It was a simple symbol, but to Daniel, it was a beacon. A sign that this house, which had once been a fortress of solitude, was now a true home. As Emma's breathing slowed, her head resting gently on Daniel's shoulder, he whispered, "I love you, Emma. I love you both." And in the quiet of that cozy living room, Daniel felt something he had never known before, a sense of true belonging. The first snow of winter dusted the rooftops and frosted the windows of Daniel's home, transforming the neighborhood into a sparkling wonderland. Sophie's laughter echoed in the front yard as she chased Duke, her cheeks rosy from the cold, her tiny boots leaving a trail of happy footprints. Inside, the house was warm and filled with the scent of cinnamon. Emma stood by the kitchen counter, carefully arranging a fresh batch of cookies on a cooling rack. Her strength had returned, her steps steady, and her laughter had become a familiar sound in the house. Daniel watched her from the doorway, his heart swelling with quiet joy. "You're going to spoil her with those cookies," he teased, stepping behind Emma and wrapping his arms around her. "Only a little," Emma replied, leaning into his embrace. "Besides, it's the first snow." "Ist." "That deserves something special," Daniel chuckled, kissing her cheek. "Every day with you two is something special." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by Sophie bursting through the door, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom!" "Dad! Look! Duke is catching snowflakes!" Daniel laughed, letting go of Emma and reaching for a towel to dry Sophie's snow-dusted hair. "Easy, kiddo. Don't turn the kitchen into a snow globe." Emma smiled, her eyes following Daniel's every movement. Seeing him with Sophie, so gentle, so full of love, filled her with a warmth she never thought she would feel again. He wasn't just part of their lives now, he was the heart of it. As the evening settled in, Daniel lit the fireplace, the soft crackling of the flames filling the cozy living room. Sophie curled up on the couch with Duke, the dog resting his head on her lap. Emma settled beside her, and Daniel brought over a large, fluffy blanket, wrapping them all together. "Mom, can we read a story?" Sophie asked, looking up at Emma. "Of course, sweetheart." "Which one?" Emma replied, brushing a soft curl from Sophie's forehead. Sophie thought for a moment. "Tell us about how you and Dad met." Daniel raised an eyebrow, a playful smile on his lips. "Oh, you want the real story, huh?" Emma laughed. "I think she's ready for it." With a gentle smile, Emma began telling the story, not just of their meeting, but of everything that followed. The difficult choices, the years apart, the unexpected reunion. She spoke of her struggles, her love for Sophie, and the night she found Daniel in the park. Daniel's voice joined hers, filling in the parts she left out. He spoke of the emptiness he hadn't even recognized in his life until that night, of Sophie's courage, and of the moment he realized he didn't just want to help them, he wanted them to be his family. Sophie listened, her eyes wide with wonder, her little fingers tracing the pattern of the blanket. "So you really didn't know I was your daughter at first, Dad?" Daniel's voice softened. "I didn't, sweetheart. But the moment I met you, you changed everything." Sophie's smile was pure sunshine. "I'm glad you found us." Emma reached for Daniel's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "We're all lucky to have found each other." The fire crackled softly, casting a warm, golden glow over the room. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, the quiet joy of being together wrapping around them like the blanket they shared. Finally, as Sophie's eyes began to flutter closed, Daniel carefully lifted her in his arms, carrying her to bed. Duke followed close behind, a faithful guardian. Emma joined him, pulling the covers up over Sophie's sleeping form, brushing a gentle kiss on her forehead. Back in the living room, Emma leaned against Daniel, her head resting on his shoulder. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "Not in my wildest dreams, but I wouldn't change a thing." Emma smiled, her voice soft. "Me neither." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's warmth, watching the snowflakes dance outside the window. And in that quiet, peaceful room, Daniel realized something. He wasn't just a man who had saved a mother and her child. He was a father, a partner, a man who had found the family he never knew he needed, a man who had finally come home. In life, we often become consumed by the relentless pursuit of success, wealth, and status, forgetting what truly brings happiness. Daniel's story is not just about finding a lost family, it's about awakening, about realizing that true strength lies not in money or power, but in love, compassion, and connection. Daniel was once a cold, lonely millionaire, surrounded by luxury, but empty inside. But when he met Sophie, a little girl abandoned in the park, and Emma, the woman he once loved, he discovered that his greatest wealth was not in his towering empire, but in the bonds of family he never knew he needed. This story reminds us that life is not measured by possessions or achievements, but by the moments of love, sacrifice, and kindness we share. True happiness is not found in what we own, but in the hearts we touch, the people we protect, and the beautiful memories we create together.